And this is part of the Drawdown initiative for all of the Unitarian Universalists nationwide, actually globally. We have participants in Canada and India, and we hope to exceed that in the coming weeks, because this initiative will go through to the middle of June. So in a nutshell, for those that are familiar with Project Drawdown, it is a recommendation of science-based, solution-oriented actions that people can take. It's about learning more about the solutions that make a difference to drawing down our carbon footprint. And we are doing that as Unitarian Universalists, partly to spread education, spread awareness, bring people together, give individuals and congregations something fun to do while we work to draw down our carbon footprint, to use some of the actions that are recommended by Project Drawdown to raise up some of our program focus areas within the UUA related to climate justice. For example, Stop Pipeline 3 in Minnesota, and raise up our relationships with Indigenous communities and build our understanding, awareness, and solidarity with them. That would be one example. Another is food justice. There was just a very fabulous conference last weekend sponsored by the United Nations office. It was an intergenerational conference all about food justice, agricultural regenerative practices, raising up minority and frontline community issues related to agriculture. But that's not why we're here today. Today, we're focused on industry. Industry, of course, is a hugely contributing sector to the climate crisis and has been, and for a number of reasons, has not been able to turn that around. I will just, like, offhand cite inconsistent regulation by the federal government does not help. However, there are leaders, and Dick Boyce in Columbus, Indiana, and Terry are, well, lucky enough to be in a community where their major employer is what I grew up calling Cummins was Cummins Engine. And they have a global footprint, and for 20 plus years have been working towards being a leader in reversing and reducing their global footprint and how they affect the environment. But they really haven't stopped there. They are a leader in their community, working with Dick and the Unitarian Church, as well as many other organizations, as well as the city of Columbus, to create and implement a climate action plan. So, so Dick, in the middle of the Midwest, where you'd least expect climate action, is really a leader in taking these steps forward. And me growing up in Illinois and being a U of I grad, so that's my connection, knows, well, you know, I was raised there, so I'm a Midwesterner as well, and just really appreciate what's happening. Let me introduce Richard Boyce from Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbus, Indiana. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Doris. As you indicated, we've been UUCCI, kind of with the help of the UUA and individuals like you, have been participating in Operation Drawdown. And while we're just kind of off to a slow start in terms of actually getting a lot of people on board doing the daily activities, but it clearly tells me as I go through it that the program is good because it puts together individual things that you can do to understand how to reduce your carbon footprint. Now, the key for us was the fact that we were in the process of working with the city of Columbus in order to go ahead and put together a climate plan. Well, like most cities and everybody else in the pandemic, there's a lot of things that are on their plate that are higher priority than creating a climate plan. So in order to get them off the dime and begin to push, we tried to go ahead and work with the major employer in town, as you indicated, Cummins Engine Company, to go ahead and begin that process. So back in November of 2019, we saw from Cummins a program that had been put together under the auspices of their chairman, Tom Lundberger, and he actually had a role in naming it, and it was called Planet 2050. And when we saw a piece in the paper about that, we began, I say we, the UUA, or the Unitarian Universalist congregation here, myself and a couple of other members began to go ahead and try to find out how we could align ourselves with that. So as you find, and this would be any congregation looking to go through the process, when the chairman of the board presents it, that's fine, he's on board, but you're not going to be able to work with him. So you have to spend a great deal of time trying to find the right individual within a corporation that it actually is in charge of this. And putting it in perspective, there's 8,000 Cummins employees in Columbus. It's a town of about 55,000. So it takes a while to go ahead and do that. And while I had been an employee of the engine company for over 25 years, it still took me some time to try to find out who that person was. Well, in getting through it and talking to people and everything else, I finally found the individual. That the person is Karen Cecil, that is the right individual in the engine company to go ahead and do that. And I started to work with her. She was nice enough to go ahead, work with us on Zoom. Of course, that's one of the problems that we're all facing. No in-person meetings. Even today, you can't go into the city hall in Columbus, Indiana without an appointment. All of their meetings and everything else are all basically set up on Zoom. And so consequently, there was no way to go ahead and do this. But we knew that in order to go ahead and put together a plan that the city was going to go ahead and at least look at, we had to get some impetus. And so we began that process. Looking at Cummins, you know, and Doris kind of touched on it, but they've been looking at basically the environment and particularly emissions for over 50 years. I mean, the EPA was started back in 1970, in December of 1970, and shortly after that, Cummins jumped right on it because they knew they were going to have to go ahead and work on diesel engine emissions. And so consequently, they've been in that process ever since. The opportunity that they put together and talked about as far as Planet 2050, it would be good. I think Doris can go ahead and put in the chat box a link to that information on Planet 2050. Interestingly enough, the chairman was so involved in it that he actually went ahead and created the name Planet 2050 from a series of words that he wanted to go ahead and highlight. And those were prosperity, leadership, advocacy, nurture, environment, and together. And so that was what he was doing in order to go ahead and really put the push on from that aspect. Cummins, while it's the largest independent producer of diesel engines in the world, it operates in over 190 countries, 61,000 employees worldwide, and 9,000 dealer locations. So, but it's also very aware that the diesel engine is getting at least near the end of its life from that standpoint. Now, just recently, it's formed relationships with Isuzu and with Mercedes. And I think that we can probably say that the diesel engine and Cummins will probably last with the diesel engine environment for at least another 30 to 40 years. But they recognize the fact that they have other things that they have to do. And so now they're totally engaged in, they put out a prototype of an all-electric truck back in 2016. They have gotten into batteries both here in the United States and in Europe, and have purchased companies to do that. And then the latest horizon is that they're working on hydrogen, and they have both stationary fuel cells and onboard fuel cells that they're working on. So consequently, you know, they're in a real position to go ahead and continue on in a power environment for a long period of time. So having said that, and seeing the level, this is the worldwide headquarters of Cummins Engine Company, and so we have a bonus, I think, because of that draw to go ahead and try to do something from a climate plan standpoint. So we began looking for other organizations other than the Unitarian Church in order to go ahead and put a committee together. Luckily, we have a very large Catholic church, St. Bartholomew. They had a strong interest in working on the environment, and they actually had a linkage with our congregation with a gentleman by the name of Barry Kastner, who was trying to go ahead and work and help the folks in their school look at the environment. And so they actually went ahead and put together an initiative. He's been working with the kids there at St. Bartholomew for over 5 years, and they went ahead and put together a plan, a kind of a quote plan to the individuals, to the mayor, as something that he should go ahead and take a look at. Well, he took a look at it. He put another individual within the city as the primary individual for us to work with, and that's Robin Hilber, and we are working with her and have had Zoom meetings and everything else, trying to go ahead and put a plan together. We also have brought on some folks from the local fund. It's called the Heritage Fund, who is the primary organization in town for funding. And one of the individuals there, Kyle Hendricks, has been nice enough to go ahead and work with us on Zoom meetings and a variety of other things. in order to do that. We brought in people from the school corporation. They're on board to go ahead and do things. And Indiana University, we've had talks with them back and forth, and their piece, Sierra Club, and then the local not-for-profit Energy Matters group. The key, I think, for any congregation to go ahead and go forward on any linkage with an industrial focus is the fact that you're going to have to get other partners. And the problem that you have, working with the city, like we said, in the pandemic situation, just being able to get in and see them has been a real hurdle from that aspect. So that's been very, very helpful. Kind of the general message that we've been working on from a climate leadership standpoint is that the industrial section is very critical to us. Doris was very nice to give us the plan and everything else, to begin to look to the cities and the different individuals within the cities and talk to them. I think if it was solely based on that type of conversation here in Columbus, we'd still be working on this probably at least a couple of years from now. I mean, because they have a riverfront project, they've got a mall project, they have an old theater, they have a variety of other things that they want to spend their money and their time on, and this just is not on the top of the agenda. And so the only way that you can really move it up in the priority is get your major employer to go ahead and begin to say, this is important and we need to go ahead and make a push here. Now, one of the pluses has been the fact that now having a new administration in Washington, D.C., having a new focus on the Paris Climate Agreement and everything else, I think we're beginning to go ahead and see movement along those lines. But it's been an issue. I think that Doris can put in the chat piece. She can go ahead and the link on what the actual climate action proposal was to the mayor and everything, and also kind of the information from Karen Cecil, where she took the Planet 2050 information and she kind of synthesized it down to actually what it means to Columbus, Indiana. And I think that's where we're working today. Now, one of the other things that we did, which has been very helpful, is we joined America is All In December 2020 as part of that effort. And the biggest thing that I think we're working on right now is that the Heritage Fund allowed us to go ahead and continue to keep the group together. Karen Cecil suggested that the way we could go ahead and begin to move forward is to bring in an organization called CDP. CDP.org is the international organization that is trying to cut or reduce the carbon footprint. And Cummins had been working with CDP and funding them for over 10 years. They've actually gathered data and everything else from their plants for over 10 years. They're all on board. So they went ahead and brought in the opportunity for us to have a Zoom meeting with CDP. And I think that Doris can also put together the slide presentation that we got from them to go ahead and show what we were doing. The real neat thing about that is that there are 4 cities in Indiana that have agreed to gather data. Bloomington, Indiana, Carmel, Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, and Indianapolis. Now, when we normally, I say we, I spent 4 years working with the Parks and Rec Foundation and everything else. And when they would go ahead and look to benchmark any city that they would go ahead and do things on, both Carmel and Bloomington were at the top of the list. Now, obviously, Indianapolis is much larger, but now Cummins actually has a presence in Indianapolis too. So I mean, it's not like they don't have that. And I think the opportunity is clearly there to go ahead and go forward. CDP made an offer, and at least the folks at I think are in the consideration phase at the city. There is no cost to go ahead and begin to work with CDP because the major corporations cover that cost, and you can have that for either a city or a county. I think there's correct me if I'm wrong, Doris, but it's like 162 cities that in the United States that have, that have gone on the program. And so hopefully we will add, to that grouping here. One of the other things that we did is
I'm just jumping in and sharing the slide.
Sharing that, yeah. This is the CDP presentation, 165 cities, 7 states. And you can see the number 4 in here for Indiana. Those 4 cities, as I mentioned to you, are Carmel, Bloomington, and Indianapolis and South Bend. And it's nice that South Bend, with its tie then to to the new cabinet member and everything else, our former member from South Bend, hopefully that will help as well. Kind of getting things rolling. The one other thing that this kind of goes through all the different organizations that they were working with and everything from that aspect. And I think that's really going to be the key to getting things rolling in Columbus. One other thing I wanted to mention, though, I had worked with a gentleman by the name of John Peterson at Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio. And I had seen that they were part of an environmental film that I had had the opportunity to go ahead and look at. And he's developed an environmental dashboard, and it's under www.environmentaldashboard.org is tied to his particular piece. And my feeling is that once we have a plan and once they have the data, then we can begin measuring things. And what he's created is a kind of a learning dashboard link that allows you to go ahead and do that. And particularly, it's tied to educating at the grade school, middle school, and high school levels. And I think that's going to be an opportunity that we might want to go ahead and encourage movement to go ahead and work with, because he had been working with several people. The cost of the program and everything else, he's managed to go ahead and begin to pull that down. He's at final stages of being able to go ahead and put this on an app. And so you would have smartphone capabilities and the ability to link to that. And I think from that standpoint, I think that that's going to be a major opportunity. He's working with Toledo, Ohio, and he's working with Cleveland And I think he has some other, I'm hoping that he'll find opportunities. He's really got it all set up in Oberlin, but Oberlin is only a city of about 8,000. So it's not even as large as Columbus, but it certainly gives you, I think, a measuring tool. And perhaps as he moves through this and people see this, I think other individuals and other companies will probably be looking to go ahead and do something similar, along the line. But my feeling, generally speaking, is what gets measured gets done, and you've got to have something. You've got to create the data set, and then you've got to go ahead and measure it, to be able to go ahead and go forward. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're doing here in Columbus and at the Unitarian Church. I think that my guidance to any congregation that would look at this is the fact that you need to go ahead and network and involve as many organizations and people that can work through the environment as possible. And clearly, that's the hallmark. Now, hopefully, now both my wife and I have had our vaccinations, and most of the population above the age of 65, I think, in Indiana has done that wanted to. Unfortunately, we have a few people who have other ideas, but I'm hoping that the preponderance of individuals get vaccinated and we go ahead and begin to look at the new normal, whatever that is. So Doris, that's about where I'm going to flip it back to you.
Well,
for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to offer everyone on the Zoom an opportunity to put their questions forth first.
So Terry will probably give me hopefully he will give me a softball, but
I'm still grabbing some notes from the chat and thinking.
Okay.
Okay, well, I would like to just make a couple comments. So I do not know enough about companies to know whether they're greenwashing or not. So I had a few kind of benchmark areas that I looked at when Dick first brought up what Cummins was doing. One is their shareholder disclosure. And they do follow the recommended industry standard. Well, actually, they go beyond the industry standard. They follow the practices of what is being promoted by the individuals promoting wise shareholder disclosure about a company's liability related to the environment. So that was a plus. Secondly, they follow the science-based practices related to the Paris Climate Agreement. And so that goes beyond, there's different scopes, if you will, of measuring your carbon footprint. Scope 1 is, well, to just oversimplify, Scope 1 is generally what you do in your building. Scope 2 is the electricity you bring into your building and your campus. And again, like I said, I'm oversimplifying. Scope 3 is what is your footprint in your facility, what energy you need to bring into your facility, and all of the residual effects and impacts that you have everywhere. So Cummins looks at all of those and is making improvements in all those areas. So that was another plus for when I was reviewing Cummins information. So everybody needs to do their due diligence when they're working with their local employers to start doing good things. But bottom line is we all have to do better. And if your local employer is not following best practices, call them out, because it makes a difference when their hometown is watching them and knows. But Cummins seems to be well into a good game. So I'm going to show a couple of slides that convinced me that paying attention to all the industries, all of the sectors contributing to greenhouse gas emissions was so important. So what you're seeing is a picture out of the Strengthen Local Climate Commitments Toolkit. And it lists all of the sector types that are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. And so really we need to be paying attention to everyone. So if any of these sectors are in your backyard, in your hometown, you have a unique opportunity to reach out and work with them to strengthen your local climate commitments. And of course, do so with justice and equity at the forefront, making sure that all of the frontline community members are at the table. So there is some background discussion. So just want to let you know to mute. So this is a image that shows by sector how much of their emissions goes into CO2, CH4 is methane, N2O, nitrous oxide, and then a lot of smaller gases. But just because it's a smaller percentage, this is not reflecting, I don't believe this is reflecting their potency. So by sector, you've got transportation, that most of that 16% goes into CO2 emissions, electricity and heat, buildings, other fuel, manufacturing, fugitive emissions. Anyway, it just shows you how important all of the different sectors combined are in their contributions to greenhouse gas global warming emissions. This diagram up here is an older one, but it gets the point across very well. Here we go. And this is this also highlights why this is a very exciting week, because this was prepared after the Paris Climate Agreement. And this gray line here shows what our nationally determined contributions were in 2015. We were going to get to a reduction of 26 to 28% below our 2005 emissions by the year 2025. We were on track to only make 17%. With a little bit of extra effort, we were going to make 21%. With all the stops pulled out, with enhanced engagement, with all the sectors, all of the communities, everybody fully engaged, we were only going to get to 24%, getting us to 32% by 2030, which is far short of the 50% goal we need to be at. And I just oversimplify it and say, because if we aren't here at 50%, we will exceed 1.5 degrees of warming, and we can say goodbye to the global south, along with so many other things that it is just completely unacceptable for us to lose as stewards of the planet. So one last thing about CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project. Excuse me. The reason that working with the Carbon Disclosure Project is so important is because of the standards, the international standards that they support and help people build into their climate planning. It's an international standard. It helps everybody compare apples to apples. It helps you know and measure accurately your baseline and all of your follow-on measurements so that you actually know if you're making progress, where you aren't, and where to focus your time and energy. So with that, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment. And the floor is open.
So I have a question for Dick. When Cummins says that diesel is going to be around for 30 to 40 years, is that in the developing country or is that worldwide? Developing countries, I mean, will the United States be done with diesel before that?
Well, Victoria, what I think will take place is that diesels will still play a role for that, and it will be a diminishing role. I think the pressures clearly are going to be on electrical, and zero emission, and perhaps hydrogen fuel cell and everything else, because that's just begun to get the green light now here. I think you're going to see more and more that movement. But the diesel engine will still play a role in certain applications where it's going to take years to put in a series of programs to go ahead and recharge all of the electrical vehicles on the interstate system. It will take a long time if they move to hydrogen. If you're going to move to hydrogen, you're going to have to move into a situation of fueling systems and everything else. And then just creating green hydrogen is going to be a real issue, because today the majority of hydrogen is produced chemically, and that's not the optimum means. You're going to have to actually split the water molecule, and that's going to be your source of hydrogen. What Cummins is seeing is that yes, they know that the diesel engine isn't going to be forever. And so they're in the process of making sure that they are a viable power supplier in the years to come, and trying to limit the carbon footprint as much as possible.
Well, I have two responses to that. One, somehow the screen went, oh, I see. One is that's why we're not going to get to 50% on time. People have talked about the need for a moonshot program to get us where we need to go. You can't get ahead of the technology. You don't know the future, but we're just plodding when Rome is burning. The other thing is, when you start phasing out something, it's kind of funny. You almost have like a flip, because, for instance, I've been thinking about my gasoline powered car, and when it's in the minority of vehicles on the road, it isn't going to be worth a dime. Nobody's going to want it, and that's a great thing. And I'm going to have a hard time finding gas, and that's a great thing. And it's going to be very expensive, and that's a great thing. So those are the comments I have about
Well,
Cummins
I think you're on the right track, Victoria. I think that as quickly as we can get there. I mean, my son happens to be in the car business, and I keep asking him about the sales of electronic automobiles, and he keeps patting me on the head and telling me that just as soon as they're really available, we'll be able to sell them and we'll work for it. And I think that clearly you look at ads today. I mean, all manufacturers are out there with their electronic cars and everything, but they're still basically saying that you're limited to perhaps 250 to 300 miles before you have to go ahead and recharge. Now, Tesla's talking about pushing it a little bit further, but 400 miles, but still, even then, there's a lot of applications that don't fit that,
Sure.
and people will still hang on to their gasoline car. If I want to go to Kansas City, and that's 10 hours, 550 miles, then electric car is, I'd have to do it in 2 days, and I'd have to go ahead and make sure that I could charge it along the way. We had some neighbors, he ended up taking his car down to Florida, and it took him 5 days to get there. So, I mean, until the infrastructure's in place, I think that's going to be the limiting factor.
Right.
I think you're going to see, you're going to see over-the-road trucks and things like that. They've talked about the ability to move into a truck stop, take out a battery pack, throw in a battery pack, and minimize that. When you look at hydrogen as a fuel source, that you can fill up just about as fast as you can fill up gas, but you have to have a station that provides it, and you have to have an infrastructure in place to provide fuel.
Right. We own an EV, and California's governor signed an executive order that by 2035, every car sold in California will be zero emission. Of course, he's in the process of being recalled because he's too green. But yeah, we don't have a place to plug it in. We take it down to the dealership, and then we take it to what's called a CHAdeMO station. And in about 30 minutes, my husband can get a 100-mile range. So that's just revolutionizing. The new charging technology is, and Tesla's driving a lot of it, but the new technology, it will blow your head off if you're in a part of the country that's supporting it.
Well, and that would be part of the infrastructure bill as well. Really kicking
I
that
don't
into
think there's
gear.
any question that's what we need to do, and I think there's going to be pressure to do that. But to Victoria's point, I mean, just how quickly will we move to that? A big part of that, I mean, for example, one of the pieces of the new infrastructure bill that they're talking about is high-speed trains. One of the things that Cummins is doing, they're working with Siemens to go ahead and they've already gotten a contract for over 250 high-speed trains. Part of the situation is getting the tracks in place to be able to to work with high-speed trains. You have to go in, and many of the tracks in the United States have not been kept up, and they haven't been welded. There's just a whole series of events that needs to take place.
So Dick, I think you and Gary must have worked that out, because Gary later in May will be presenting on high-speed trains as part of this series for Drawdown. Go ahead, Gary.
Actually, it's a big step to high-speed trains. It's a much smaller step to higher speed trains.
Right, exactly. Right.
Okay. And I just
we've got to be planning for a non-auto-centric future.
No question about it, Gary. I'm definitely on the page with you, but if you look at all of the cities, we have to move to a variety of. We just have to look at transportation that is not car based.
That's right.
And,
Well,
Or aviation based, yeah.
Or aviation based.
Yeah. So I would like before we move on, I would like to direct Victoria to the link I put in the chat of Karen's presentation about Cummins. Even though Dick did a wonderful job of explaining why they will still be diesel manufacturing, or diesel will still be needed 30 years, 50 years from now. Karen's presentation probably brings that out a little bit better, as well as all the other areas that they are focused on, such as water issues globally and in every community where they work. So her presentation and the video of it is linked in the chat.